speaker, Jessica Kasamoto, and she will talk about the madness of multi-clock aging, trying to find the 1 in 1,000. Okay, the stage is yours. The presentation is here. Next slide. Pointer.
Let's see.
Good luck.
Oh, okay, cool. Hi, everyone. It was really nice talking to a lot of you at my poster today and yesterday. But if you missed it, I'm talking about it now. So you can hear it now, which is good. So essentially, I just wanted to start off this talk by letting everyone know that there is a crisis. And there's a crisis in science, and that crisis isn't the replication crisis. So it is estimated that about 70% of scientific research is failing to be reproduced by other scientists. And so with that, the logical thing to ask ourselves would be, is this happening in our field? Is there currently a replication crisis in aging? And if so, how would this look like? Let's find out. Let's say I wanted to calculate the biological age of this individual, who some of you may know is my PI, Albert Higgins-Chen. I don't know where he's sitting. Here's Albert. Wave. I wanted to calculate his biological age. So what I would do is I would get his DNA methylation data. I would do some pre-processing steps in order to get my IDAT files into a usable format. So I can calculate my clock. I'll calculate my clock. In this case, it's pheno age, and boom, I would get a biological age. Super easy. Okay, I can do that. Let's see. So I do this first. I get the data and I calculate Albert's age, and I get that Albert has a biological age of 36, which is as expected. Fine, great. No worries there. But then I give the data to somebody else in my lab, and they get that Albert has a biological age of 25, which is weird, but it makes Albert happy, so that's okay. But then I give the data to somebody else in my lab, and they get that Albert has a biological age of 60. And so now Albert's not happy. So now we need to figure out what's going on. So essentially, we have to ask, what is going on inside the black box? And pre-processing is something that we all have to do, but it's not really a standardized thing. There's no right answer in the way to do it. So essentially, when we uncover the black box, we can see that every person took a slightly different path in pre-processing their data in order to get a very different outcome for their biological age. And so with this, how can we tell if this is actually happening? So how can we see if this is really happening? Well, we can ask the multiverse. So what is a multiverse analysis? So instead of doing a traditional analysis where you analyze two or three processing pipelines and maybe you report the outcome for one, typically the one that has the most significance, which can definitely lead to p-hacking. You can do that, or you can do a planned analysis where one pathway is determined from the beginning, and that one pathway is the one that's reported at the end, or you could do all of them. You could do a multiverse analysis where essentially all combinations of steps are taken, and this analysis is done many times with these different parameters to see how robust your final outcome is to arbitrary choices that you made in your processing. So with that, so how can we use this for clocks? So in my multiverse analysis, I'm using the data from the Biomarkers of Aging Challenge. I'm using the package enmix to pre-process my data. And essentially what I'm doing is making different pipelines to process my data using some very simple steps. So the first step I have is background correction, which has three options. So that's 3 universes or 3 different pipelines that I can use to process my data. At another step, die correction with 3 more options. This gives us 9 universes. But then we're going to add more. We're going to add normalization. We're going to add probe design type bias correction. We're going to add p-value detection cutoff. And we're going to add an imputation method, which leaves us with a grand total of 1,080 universes, or essentially 1,080 different ways to calculate the same clock. In this case, pheno age. And we can not only look at the biological ages, but we can also calculate aging metrics, such as age correlation, age slope. And if we had the mortality data, we could also calculate that. And so essentially how I did this, we used a tool from the University of Washington called BOBA, which essentially I input all the steps, all the options, and all the steps and all the options for each step. And it essentially makes one script for each pipeline. But then you have to run 1,080 scripts, which would only take you about 34 days which is really long, so I had to figure that out. So essentially what we did is we did a form of dynamic programming, which essentially minimized the number of steps as you were calculating and drastically cut down the runtime to 12 hours. And so yeah, if you want to talk about that, I don't have time to talk about it now, but so essentially with that and the results, so we go back to our initial question, what is the biological age of one individual? We can ask the multiverse now. So essentially, what I have here is the age distribution for one individual for 1,080 different universes. So essentially, it's the same raw data, the same plot, but the only difference is that we pre-processed the data with slightly different steps. And essentially, we see that we get a biological age range from around 25 to 60, which brings us back to what I was saying at the beginning. Albert is simultaneously 25, 37, and 60. And so we can not only look at the outcome for biological age, but we can also look at the different steps that we took in our pipeline and essentially how these steps affected the final outcome. And we saw that our fourth step, the probe and design type bias correction, had the biggest impact on our final outcome. And we can see that here when we plotted by that, we can see that there's something going on when it's true that's leading to these older Alberts. So essentially, we can look at the biological age, but we can also look at other metrics such as age correlation and age slope. And for all these metrics, we can see that a range of values were given out for each universe. So you're not getting the same thing every time. It can change like depending on your pipelines. But another interesting thing I wanted to note was that it was a different step that had the biggest effect on age correlation versus age slope. So essentially we need to test how these different metrics are being affected by our processing pipelines. And so with this, we know now that different pipelines lead to different outcomes. So we have to ask ourselves, is there a best pipeline? And if so, how do we standard this in the Asian community? And so with that, some future directions, we want to do more. This was just an example where we chose some steps and chose one clock. We can do more steps, more options per step, more clocks, more data, and more metrics. And in addition, we can also use the multiverse analysis to train our clocks. So essentially looking at different feature selection options, feature engineering options, et cetera, and how training your clock in different ways leads to different outcomes. And so with that, I wanted to briefly bring it back to my colleague who was talking earlier. We can very easily implement this multiverse pipeline into Translate, where we're looking at more clocks, more data, and more metrics. And so I wanted to thank everyone in the Hayden Shen Lab for really supporting me in this. Couldn't have done it without them. And that's me. If you have any questions now or over email or LinkedIn, yes.
Thank you, Jessica, so much. And it's like